She thought it would be just another exhausting shift, serving wealthy customers who barely looked at her, pretending their comments didn't sting. But that morning, everything changed. One accusation, fueled by arrogance and prejudice, cost her the job she desperately needed. In front of the entire restaurant, the billionaire CEO demanded she be thrown out, claiming she didn't belong there. No investigation. No chance to defend herself. Just humiliation and silence. Most people would have walked away, broken and angry. But as she stepped out those doors, something didn't feel right. She had noticed something no one else did, something dangerous, hidden beneath the surface of the man who had just destroyed her livelihood. Minutes later, his life was hanging by a thread. And the only person who could save him was the woman he had publicly shamed. What she chose to do next didn't just change his fate, it exposed a chilling truth about power, prejudice, and the cost of being ignored. Before we continue, tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? Why would a woman save the man who treated her as if she were invisible? Before that morning, her life was built on routine and quiet endurance. She woke before sunrise, packed a small lunch, and took the same crowded bus into the city, surrounded by people who never met her eyes. The diner where she worked wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. She moved quickly between tables, remembering every order, every preference, and every allergy. Regulars appreciated her warmth, even if they rarely acknowledged it out loud. Management praised her work ethic when the doors were closed, yet treated her as replaceable when customers complained. She carried the weight of responsibility alone. Rent, medication for her mother, and groceries stretched them to their limit. Every paycheck mattered. Losing this job wasn't an inconvenience. It was survival. Still, she kept her head high. She believed in working hard, staying kind, and proving people wrong through actions, not arguments. But beneath that resilience lived a quiet exhaustion, built from years of subtle remarks, suspicious glances, and assumptions about her worth. The diner had become her safe space, the one place she felt in control. Until the morning the billionaire walked in. His arrival shifted the atmosphere instantly. Employees straightened up, customers whispered, and managers hovered nervously. She noticed how everyone treated him differently, offering special service, excessive smiles, and exaggerated respect. She had seen powerful men before, but never one who demanded attention without saying a word. Then came the moment that changed everything. A spilt drink. A misplaced accusation. A single glare filled with entitlement and prejudice. The billionaire's outrage wasn't about the mistake, it was about who he believed had made it. His judgment was immediate and absolute, fueled by assumptions about her competence and place in that room. Within seconds, she went from valued employee to unwanted burden, without anyone questioning his claims. As she stood outside the diner, heart pounding, humiliation burning through her, she tried to process how quickly her world had crumbled. Yet something else tugged at her thoughts. During the confrontation, she had noticed a tremor in his hand, a strain in his breathing, and a moment where his confidence faltered. Most people dismissed it, too focused on his anger. But she had seen signs like that before, signs that spelt danger. Something was wrong with him. And despite everything he'd done, she couldn't ignore it. What she didn't realize was that this instinct, this split-second observation, would place her at the center of a life-or-death moment and expose a truth far more frightening than losing her job. As she walked away from the diner, the chill of the morning air stung more than usual. It wasn't just the loss of a job, it was the way it happened. The way every eye in the room had followed her, some with pity, others with relief that they weren't the target. Not one voice spoke up. Not one person questioned the billionaire's accusation. Her years of perfect service, her loyalty, and her sacrifices meant nothing the moment a powerful man decided she didn't belong. She had experienced subtle racism before, being followed in stores, ignored when others were served, and asked if she could afford something she touched. But this time, it wasn't subtle. It was public, humiliating, and final. Her worth had been stripped away with a single command, and everyone accepted it without hesitation. She tried to push the memory aside, but the tremor in his hand haunted her thoughts. The way he gripped the table, the sudden paleness in his face, the shallow breaths he tried to hide. She had seen those signs in her mother during health emergencies, moments that required immediate action. Ignoring them could have deadly consequences. Still, she convinced herself it wasn't her problem anymore. He had made that clear. But as she reached the bus stop, sirens pierced the air. Not the distant hum of city noise, this was close. Too close. A crowd formed outside the diner entrance, voices rising in panic. She felt her heartbeat quicken. Part of her wanted to keep walking, to let fate deal with the man who had destroyed her morning. Yet something deeper pulled her back. When she turned, she saw him collapse. His body crumpled to the floor, surrounded by people frozen in shock. Employees scrambled uselessly, unsure what to do. Managers shouted for someone to call for help, their polished confidence gone. No one moved toward him. No one knew how to respond. She stood at the edge of the crowd, breath caught in her throat. She could walk away. No one expected anything from her. She was invisible again, just another face in the background. But she also knew the truth. If someone didn't act fast, he wouldn't survive. Her instincts took over. She pushed through the crowd, feeling hands brush against her, hearing whispers questioning why she was there. Some recoiled, others stared with suspicion, as if she were responsible for his condition. Even in crisis, prejudice clung tightly. A few tried to block her path, assuming she was interfering rather than helping. Their hesitation cost precious seconds. She reached him just as his breathing slowed, his skin turning a worrying shade. She recognized the signs unmistakably now. The emergency training she had taken to care for her mother flooded back. Steps, timing, pressure points, everything she needed to stabilize him long enough for help to arrive. Tension rippled through the crowd as she began to act. Some watched with skepticism, arms crossed, waiting for her to fail. Others filmed with their phones, capturing the spectacle without lifting a finger. Not one person offered assistance. She fought through their doubt, focusing only on keeping him alive. For a moment, his breathing steadied. Ambulance lights flashed in the distance, sirens growing louder. Relief washed through her, but it faded quickly when she noticed a new threat. His security team had arrived. Large, imposing figures pushed their way through the crowd, faces twisted with suspicion. They didn't see a woman trying to save their employer. They saw someone hovering over him, someone they already blamed for the scene inside. Their hands reached for her. Their voices rose in anger, accusing without evidence, fueled by assumptions. The crowd stepped back, giving them space to confront her, even as the billionaire's condition worsened again. The paramedics were seconds away, but those seconds could determine whether he lived or died. She froze, torn between fear and responsibility. If she stepped back now, he might not make it. But staying could put her in danger, not just physically, but legally. She had seen how quickly blame could shift onto someone like her. The crowd held its breath. And just as she prepared to defend herself, a sudden realization struck her, a detail she had overlooked in the chaos, something hidden in plain sight that explained everything about his collapse. Something far more sinister than a simple medical emergency. Her heart raced as the truth formed in her mind. If she was right, this wasn't an accident. Chaos erupted the moment the security team reached her. Rough hands pulled her away from the billionaire's side, shoving her backward as if she were the threat. The crowd didn't protest. Some even nodded, relieved to see the problem removed. She stumbled, nearly falling, watching helplessly as the man she had fought to keep alive began to fade again. His breathing weakened, his body slackened, and the faint stability she had restored slipped away. She tried to speak, to warn them, to point out the signs she had noticed, the discoloration around his lips, the abnormal tremor, the way his pulse had spiked before collapsing. But they didn't want to hear her. To them, she wasn't a witness or a rescuer. She was the fired waitress, the accused nuisance, someone already labeled and judged. Her voice held no weight. The injustice hit her like a blow. She had stepped in when no one else did. She had saved precious minutes of his life. Yet now she was being treated as though she were the cause of his suffering, not the reason he still had a chance. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the guards pinned her against a wall, gripping her arm tightly. His eyes were filled with suspicion and anger, convinced she had harmed the billionaire. The crowd watched in silence, recording the scene like spectators at a spectacle rather than witnesses to a grave mistake. Their silence felt louder than the sirens and shouting. And in that terrifying moment, she saw what everyone else missed. A small container slipping from the hand of someone standing near the edge of the crowd, someone who had been close to the billionaire earlier, someone who had blended into the chaos unnoticed. Her mind raced back to the diner, remembering a brief interaction she had witnessed, a suspicious exchange of hands that seemed harmless at the time. Now the pieces aligned with chilling clarity. This wasn't a random medical emergency. He had been poisoned. Her heart pounded as she realized the truth. The billionaire wasn't just collapsing, he had been targeted. And now the real culprit was trying to disappear into the confusion, confident that blame would fall on the most convenient person, her. She tried to break free, but the guard tightened his hold, ignoring her panic. The paramedics finally reached the billionaire, struggling to stabilize him without the critical information she held. Every second mattered. If she didn't get their attention, he would die. Desperation surged through her. She fought against the guard's grip, fueled by fear and outrage. She had already lost her dignity, her job, and her sense of safety. She refused to lose herself in silence. Not again. Not when she knew the truth. But the more she struggled, the more the crowd turned against her. Whispers spread quickly, accusations, assumptions, rumors. Some pointed toward her, convinced she had caused the collapse. Phones captured her being restrained, ready to paint her as the villain. The narrative was slipping beyond her control. She looked toward the billionaire, his life hanging by a thread. She looked toward the person retreating quietly, blending into the background, escaping justice with ease. And she understood the horrifying reality. The world was prepared to believe the worst about her, even when she was the only one trying to save him. Her voice trembled inside her chest, trapped behind fear and injustice. This was the moment everything would turn. Would she be silenced and blamed, or would the truth finally break through before it was too late? If you're glued to this story, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the shocking ending. The moment the paramedics realized something was wrong beyond a simple collapse, everything changed. One of them noticed the symptoms she had been trying to explain: discoloration, irregular pulse, and the faint chemical scent on his breath. It matched poisoning patterns they had been trained to identify. Suddenly, the urgency in their movements shifted. Antidotes were prepared, oxygen increased, protocols initiated. For the first time since the incident began, there was real hope. The guard restraining her loosened his grip, confusion flickering across his face as he watched the medical team react. The whispers in the crowd shifted too. Doubt crept in. Maybe she wasn't the villain they had eagerly assumed she was. Maybe they had been wrong. When the billionaire's breathing steadied and his pulse strengthened, relief washed through the crowd. But she didn't feel relief, not fully. She watched as the person who dropped the container was apprehended at the edge of the sidewalk, exposed when the paramedics called out the poisoning symptoms. Security, now realizing their mistake, redirected their anger toward the real culprit. Suddenly, she was no longer the threat. She was the key witness. But the damage had already been done. She remained standing there, shaken, bruised, humiliated, painfully aware of how quickly the world had turned on her without evidence. Moments earlier, she was saving a life. Now she was treated as though she had tried to take one. Later, at the hospital, doctors confirmed what she had known all along. The billionaire would have died if she hadn't acted when she did. Her intervention bought the crucial minutes that allowed the antidote to work. Without her, the headline would have been tragic. The billionaire survived. When he regained enough strength to understand what happened, shock and disbelief overtook him. He had built his life on power, influence, and control. Yet the person he dismissed, insulted, and publicly removed had been the one to save him. His wealth couldn't protect him. His status couldn't save him. The people who surrounded him out of loyalty or fear had frozen when he needed them most. Only the woman he degraded acted. He offered apologies, gratitude, and promises of compensation. But none of it erased the moment when the world chose to believe the worst about her simply because of who she was, and who he was. No amount of money could undo the humiliation, the fear, or the instinctive suspicion directed toward her. She had seen the truth in the crowd's eyes. They were ready to blame her before they even knew what happened. She walked away not as a hero in their stories, but as a reminder of an uncomfortable reality. Her act of humanity did not erase the prejudice she faced. It highlighted it. Because the truth was painfully clear, she had to save a billionaire's life just to be seen as worthy of basic respect. And even then, some still questioned her intentions. The incident became a headline for a few days, shared online with dramatic captions and fleeting outrage. People argued, debated, and pointed fingers. But for her, it wasn't a story to consume. It was a lived experience that left scars no article could describe. She returned to her routine, carrying both pride and exhaustion. She saved a life. But she also witnessed how quickly society could turn on someone who looked like her. This wasn't just one moment. It was a reflection of a pattern repeated in restaurants, streets, workplaces, and hospitals across the world, where assumptions replace truth, and prejudice decides guilt before facts are known. So the real question remains: how many more lives must be risked, how many truths ignored, before society finally learns to see people beyond the labels it creates? Or will stories like hers continue, unheard, until another life hangs in the balance?